Welcome back to Pro-Life Without Borders with Sarah and Mikayla and two little friends.
They're so cute.
So if you're on the audio only version, you can't see them, but I am holding a little plushie that is gonorrhea. And Mikayla is holding chlamydia.
And he's like a little green. He almost looks like a blueberry, but he's green.
He's green. Gonorrhea looks like an hourglass.
Yeah,
but
like
they have eyes like a peanut. Yeah. And
they're
so
cute.
They are cute.
Look
and
at
so
this little face.
We are not sponsored by anyone. But you can go to giantmicrobes.com and you can actually buy yourself microbes.
You could buy like organs and stuff too.
Like, yeah, actually, so we bought Jeremiah a heart and 2 lungs.
Right.
Like
just a whole body.
An entire body at this point. Yeah. So you can buy, like, it's really great for kids who are having surgery or organ transplant. I would not recommend this, but there are individuals who have found that they are in fact carrying an STD, and so they send plushies to their partners.
STD reveal?
Yes. Which is so awkward and not appropriate.
But like, if you have to tell someone like, hello, I might have given you an STD.
Maybe that's the way to do it. I don't know. I prefer to live my life in such a way that I could never give someone an STD.
Correct. But, so hopefully you never have to do that. But if you did,
I guess it's not.
Giantmicrobes.com. They're cute.
They are cute. So we actually use these as part of our marketing. We take them to fairs and stuff because one of the services we provide here is STD testing and treatment, and we actually test and treat for chlamydia and gonorrhea. We are in the middle of adding testing for syphilis and HIV. We will not treat for HIV because that's more of like a lifelong maintenance kind of thing that we're not really equipped for.
Right.
But we will treat for syphilis, and syphilis is resurging right now, so it's kind of a big deal.
We love a comeback.
Not that one.
But not that one.
So there's a lot of things. One of the things that I often hear is, why do you do STD testing? Like, if your goal is to save babies from abortion, what does that have to do with STD testing? Is this a good use of, and it's something that we discussed when we added it, is this a good use of resources? Are we inadvertently encouraging poor behavior? Like, do we want to make people think like, oh, it's okay if you get an STD, we'll just take care of it? And so we want to use this episode to kind of talk about some of those questions and also talk about some of the cool things that have happened through our STD testing program.
Right.
Yeah. So let me back up. So we teach abstinence in our local schools.
Yes. Sexual risk avoidance.
So don't reduce the risk of sexual activity. Avoid it by saving sex for a lifelong committed relationship.
Yep. Which we call marriage.
Here, yes, and everywhere.
And in most places.
So we also teach abstinence, sexual risk avoidance in our medical services, in our parenting program. So regardless of who you are, how old you are, what your history has been, we recommend that if you are not married, you do not have sex. And if you are married, you only have sex with the person you are married to. And if today the whole world saw this podcast and were like, wow, Sarah, that's genius. I wish I'd thought of that. And they all commit to that model, we would eliminate 99% of our problems.
Yeah, we'd eliminate,
Like, we would have no more unwanted pregnancies, unplanned pregnancies, because I think the rate of unplanned pregnancy in marriage is or unwanted pregnancy in marriage is extremely low.
Right.
It's not zero, but it's low.
Yeah.
And some of the time I wonder, because there are statistics about like how many married women seek abortions. I would be interested to know how many of those women are seeking an abortion where the child is their husband's.
Right. Yeah. Like, usually whenever a married woman is seeking an abortion, it's indicative of relationship problems.
Yeah. So maybe they were on a break and mom is dating, dad is dating, mom gets pregnant, and then now the husband and wife are trying to get back together, and the baby is like, they see it as
math ain't mathin'.
Yes, they see it as an impediment, like this baby's gonna ruin this getting back together. Sometimes it's it's a rape situation where like, yeah, I'm married, but this isn't my baby's husband because I was raped. Or whatever situation like that.
Husband's baby. Babies don't have husbands. Child marriage is ick.
Oh, sorry. No, the baby's father.
Yeah, she was like, yeah, this isn't the baby's husband. I was like, oh.
Baby should not have husbands.
That should be a podcast episode. Child marriage.
Is it?
Deal with it. Yeah.
We'll talk about it later. But today we're talking about STDs. So Yes. However, we know that that will probably not happen. As much as I do wish the entire world would listen to me, it's unlikely in the extreme.
Yeah.
So that being said, one of the reasons that we have STD testing as part of our services is because people who are concerned about catching an STD are engaging in sex.
Yeah.
Hence the sexually
Yeah.
in sexually transmitted diseases.
And so people who are engaging in sexual activity, so not only are they, I hesitate to use the word, at risk for STDs, but what are they also at risk for?
Pregnancy.
Pregnancy.
Because
if they are a woman.
If you play the game of sex, you are opening yourself up to pregnancy if you're a woman, diseases regardless of gender. And people need to be tested for and treated for those diseases. The reason that we do chlamydia and gonorrhea right now is, first of all, you can do it with a urine test, which is easier for us as a clinic than a blood test. They're also the most common STDs. So if you have chlamydia, if you have an STD, honestly, it's probably chlamydia. Like, it's just the one that goes around the most.
Yeah.
And so you can be treated for it most of the time. There are bacterial or antibiotic resistant strains that are popping up. But for the most of the time, you can get an antibiotic, you can be treated. And then we always encourage people to let their partners know. Whether or not you choose to do that with a plushie is up to you. I would.
That cracks me up. I'm so sorry.
You can actually send a bouquet of STDs, which is very concerning.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, how many are anyway.
Yeah.
So we do encourage people to let their partners know that they are being treated so that their partners can be treated. And it comes kind of like a bit of a problem. So let's say I've been tested and I've been diagnosed with chlamydia and I've had 3 partners in the last 3 months. And so I have to tell all 3 of them, well, how many partners have they had in the last 3 months? And then how many partners have they had in the last 3 months? And so it's very easy to see how they spread so quickly when you have a situation where people are having multiple partners in a smaller, or any size really, but in a community, because people are, it's like that chart of if you've had this many partners, this is how many people you're exposed to, assuming that that your partner has had as many partners as you've had. And I think by the time you get to 12, it's in the thousands.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
So when someone comes in, we do an STD test. We talk to them about relationships. We screen for domestic violence. We screen for sex trafficking, and we screen for suicidal ideation, just like we do with all of our other appointments. And we talk about hey, how do you feel about your current sexual activity? And is this the kind of choice that you want to make? And it's not in a way of judging someone or making them feel bad or making them feel guilty. It's really just to kind of ask some questions and kind of get them thinking. Okay, you're here for an STD test, which means that there's at least a chance that you've been with someone who has a disease. Is that how you want to live? Is that something that you want to be concerned about or something that you want to think about? And so we want them, we want to have those conversations.
Right.
And then we send the test out. We get the results usually in a few days to a week. And then if they need to be treated, they can come back and be treated. And then we can also treat partners and do that. So we do the STD testing for that reason, because it helps us create a reputation in the community. We're kind, we're fun, we're nice. We have great.
It's free.
It's free.
Which
is very unusual.
Is in a state university town, and so we're working with college students who don't have any money.
Right, and if they did, they wouldn't want to spend it on an STD test.
Exactly, and we happen to know that this state university's health clinic, I don't know what it's called, their health center, charges for STD testing.
Right, so, and they can come get it from us for free.
Right.
And get the treatment for free. Yeah. And if they're allergic to the treatment that we have on site, then we can get a prescription to their local pharmacy and they can go pick up one of the alternative treatments for the STD. So we can take care of it that way. So a lot of it is to get our name out there, help people know hey, if I am pregnant, I can go to them. We also test any of our female clients for pregnancy, because we can't treat them if they're pregnant. That makes it really complex, and it's more than we can manage here. But we need to know if they're pregnant. And then also we offer it to our clients who are coming with a positive pregnancy test, because an STD can adversely affect your pregnancy.
Absolutely.
And the baby that you're carrying. And so we don't want that for women, so we can at least say, hey, you are positive or you're negative, and then they can take that information to their OB and get the treatment that they need under the care of an OBGYN.
Right. And the care for an STD in a woman who's pregnant is continuous, right? Like it's something that takes longer than just
there's definitely more follow-up.
Yeah, and it also depends on the STD, because things like HIV could be passed down to baby, and so that management is different than
like chlamydia.
Right.
Or syphilis is a really bad deal if you are pregnant.
Right. Yes.
And so it has to be treated, or the baby could end up with some serious issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I am always mildly shocked by is like the treatment for the STDs that we treat is like a treatment. Like when you have strep throat, you have like a 10-day course of antibiotics.
Right.
But somehow chlamydia is just like, you're good.
You take a pill?
I think it's an injection.
What? Sorry, I've never had an STD.
Me either. And we would have to ask Julie to be sure, our nurse practitioner, because she does all the treatment.
But what we do know is that it is not a major inconvenience.
Right. And I think one of them is a pill and one is an injection, depending on like which one you have. And then you sit in the office for like
syphilis are pills.
Yes, and I think chlamydia is an injection. I think.
I learn something new every
now
day.
I'm really
that little
guy. So you
Sorry,
said
I have chlamydia.
Yeah, no, I have gonorrhea.
No.
You are holding. Mikayla is holding the stuffy that represents chlamydia, and I am holding the stuffy that represents gonorrhea. We're neither of us has an STD. So you get to come in.
Disaster.
If you have an, I'm fine with leaving it.
Oh, I'm leaving it because I'll forget to edit it out. So just accept it.
So Julie, if you come in for a STD test, you might meet with Mary Jo or Becky or Tracy or Rachel the first time. And then if you're positive, you get to meet with Julie, our certified nurse practitioner. She's a riot.
She's fun.
Love Julie. And she will do some education with you, talk about the importance of notifying your partners, and then treat you. And then you have to sit here for a few minutes and make sure you don't like pass out or break out in hives. And then once she can be sure that you are not going to have a like horrible allergic reaction, you're free to, go on your way. And we do recommend like that you don't have sex for a certain amount of time after, so you don't accidentally pass it to someone else while you're kind of being treated. So a couple things is one of the weird things that's happened over the last, I would say, decade is that STDs have shifted from like this, I'm so embarrassed, I can't believe this happened, to sort of being like very run of the mill. Like no big deal. Like sometimes you catch a cold, sometimes you catch the flu, sometimes you catch gonorrhea.
I saw like someone that I don't even think I follow them on TikTok, but like just someone that's like regularly in my TikTok feed kind of made a series about going to be treated for an STD.
Like they were being treated?
Yes. And
like it was like a good thing?
It was a series. So it was more than once.
Wonder what it was.
I know at one point it was chlamydia. And I obviously didn't have much interest in the series, but
now I want to see it.
But it was like this, I'm on my way to get treated for chlamydia, like just kind of out there on TikTok. And it was just, he was doing so just to make it like this should be a run of the mill thing. Like we're just going to get treated. And like, I don't think disease should be a run of the mill thing.
Well, and there are diseases that you can't help.
Sure.
Like the cold, the common cold, a flu.
You're just going to get the cold.
COVID.
You're going to get the flu at some point.
You're probably going to get COVID at some point.
You're probably going to get COVID. Well, at this point, like, they just kind of assume, like, well, like.
Right. But STDs are transmitted in a very specific way.
Yeah.
And they exist because people are having multiple partners. Right. So if you limit your partners and you limit your exposure, you're not going to catch an STD. And so I think that this idea that it's just going to happen, like you're going to catch a cold, you're going to catch a flu, you're going to catch chlamydia, is really selling people short, because we should be telling people, no, you can choose not to have an STD. Right. Now, there are, and please do not come at me, guys. I'm very fragile. This is like a post-election video, and a lot of people have come at me. Okay. Yeah. Yes, there are stories of women who got married and they were virgins on their wedding night, and their husband immediately gives them something.
Sure.
So, and that's not cool.
No, it's not cool. And also, like, there are consequences for sin, right?
Right.
And so
even other people sin.
even other people sin. And I think that's a conversation to be had. I know in my home state, it used to be that you were required by law to get STD tested
Really?
before they would issue a marriage
That
certificate.
kind of makes sense, actually.
And it kind of made sense. I have not checked up to see if that is still the case. Pretty conservative home state. So it could be. Maybe I'll look it up and forget to put a note about it in the podcast editing.
So typically I encourage people, if your partner has had partners before you, okay, so you're engaged,
Mhm.
ready to get married, you're ready to walk down the aisle with your spouse or your future spouse, get them tested.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it's not a forgiveness thing. I've had girls, well, I forgive him and I don't want him to think that I don't forgive him. Because usually it's the girl. Usually the girl, and I'm not saying this is always the case, but in my experience, usually the girl is the one who saved herself for marriage. The guy went out and sowed some wild oats in the past. Sorry, that's what they call them.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Like maybe 3, maybe 5, maybe 10 years ago. I don't want him to think that I don't trust him. I don't want him to think I haven't forgiven him. No, you don't. If he doesn't know.
You can forgive someone and also have them treated for an STD.
Right. And also, like, he may not know. That's what I'm like, he's not necessarily lying to you. He may not know he has an STD that he's carrying around.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's the harm of doing a full panel? And I wouldn't even do just like a screening like what we do right now for chlamydia and gonorrhea. I would do a full panel, test for everything you can test for, and make sure, to the best of everyone's knowledge, that no one's going to bring something into the relationship.
Right.
And if something pops up, especially if it's like a scary something like HIV, or even something less scary but permanent like herpes, then you can have that discussion. And you can still choose to marry that person.
Absolutely.
But you're then marrying them with your eyes wide open.
Yeah. And there's,
Yeah. So we have to stop. We have to change the narrative. We have to not allow it to feel like just, and I'm not saying to make people feel guilty or ashamed. What I'm saying is help them understand, like, this is not something you have to fear.
Right.
Like, you can change your life if you want to. You can change your life choices. You can change the way that you conduct your relationships so that you do not have to fear getting an STD or having an unplanned pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
That's possible. So that's part of why we do it, because we are able to do that education. We're able to talk about, relationships and boundaries and refusal skills and all those sorts of things. The other reason that we do it, and it's, I don't want to say it's a secondary reason because it's never the secondary reason, but it's another reason, is that it's a really cool opportunity to share the gospel, which honestly none of us saw coming. So we love to share the gospel. We love to talk about Jesus, as any of you that have listened to this podcast know. But it's really neat when someone comes in and they are here for an STD test and you get a chance to talk to them about Jesus. Like, it's really cool.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's because they feel guilty about the behavior that they've engaged in. We had an individual come in who had a lot of partners, and this person was a believer, and they had been raised in the church, and they had at one time been a very faithful Christian. And when I asked kind of our like boilerplate question of like, what do you believe? They kind of broke down because they were really struggling with the guilt of the sexual choices that they were making. And they did not expect, and I'm using they just because I don't want to even come close to violating this individual's confidentiality, even though it was quite a while ago. They really felt like no one was going to listen to them, that people were going to judge them, that no one was going to understand. And they were sitting like across the couch from me. And I'm like, I'm not judging you. Like, I'm just asking you, like, what are your beliefs? And they were able to tell me about like how they do believe in Jesus and they know that what they're doing is wrong. And I was able to encourage them to reach out to, like, I think they said they would reach out to like a former youth pastor that they had a connection with. And so that was really, really neat. Another time I was doing an STD test. Now, I'm not a nurse. I don't do the like testing. I do like the paperwork. And then sometimes I could like process the sample.
Oh, that's fun.
Which I'm always really grossed out about.
Yeah.
But it's very simple.
Like, so fun.
It's so easy. Like, people are like, don't you have to be a nurse to do that? And I'm like, listen, if I can do it, anyone can do it. It's not hard. But we had a gentleman come in, and he is a veteran. And he was like and the only reason I'm saying he and not they is because it's going to be obvious that it's a he as I tell the story. Big, brawny man's man.
Okay.
Like, everything's a joke.
Okay.
I mean, I was honestly uncomfortable, and you know how hard it is to make me uncomfortable. He was rude, he was crude, he was bragging about his sexual conquest. I mean, it was not a good time.
Yeah.
And I was honestly ready for him to go.
Sure.
I was like, I'm not comfortable. I don't like where this is heading. I don't like your attitude, but I'm here to do a service and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability. So I'm just I'm not rushing the appointment, but I'm also not interested in having.
Yeah, you're not trying to drag it out longer than it has to.
Right.
Be.
And so I asked him about suicide. And he had been considering suicide because of some of the things that he had seen in combat.
Yeah. Yeah. Better.
And this big, burly, gigantic man just fell apart.
Aww.
It was the cutest thing.
That's not cute.
I mean, not cute, but like he went from this overbearing, blustering, rude, imposing individual to like, as a mom, I'm like, you're like a little kid.
Yeah.
Like he kind of like.
And I imagine that some of the life choices, if not all of the life choices he was making, is impacted by some of that.
Yeah.
You're coping.
Yes. And so he kind of fell apart and became very vulnerable and became very almost small. And I was able to like talk to him like a mom and tell him that like he's loved by, I'm going to start crying. Tell him that he was loved by God and that even though he saw some really horrible things that like, or maybe even engaged in horrible things, like, I don't know, that like God loved him and was waiting for him and looking for him and wanting him to come into relationship. And that people are depending on him, just like the nation depended on him when he was overseas, and people are depending on him here to be that protector and to be that leader and to be that wolf that guards, the territory or whatever. And it was a really powerful and impactful appointment, and that only happened because of our STD testing program.
Yeah, and I think that's a good. Not to bring the Jesus moment like too early or anything.
That's all right. The whole thing's a Jesus moment.
Well, I think it's important to know because I do think that perhaps the church has elevated sexual sin to a level of unforgiveness.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that it is not wrong. I'm not saying that it's not bad. And I'm not saying that like, well, it's just the same as telling someone a lie, because
it carries extra consequences.
There are extra consequences.
Yeah, both physically and emotionally.
Right. And so I'm not trying to belittle like the gravity of that particular sin, but I do think as a church we have made it the unforgivable sin. Mm-hmm.
Or we've elevated certain sexual sins like homosexuality.
Right.
And that's worse than living with your boyfriend.
Right.
Which it's not.
No. Sin is sin. Mm-hmm. All the way around. And that goes for sexual sin as well. And so we need to, I think, be mindful of not making it something that is unforgivable, because it is. Mm-hmm. It is. And people can come back from that and people can turn from that. Mm-hmm. And I think that is an important conversation to have, because we have the same types of conversations on the chat line.
Yes.
Right. And so every client, because most of them are not married. Mm-hmm. And so every client who I talk to, we're like, hey, this might be a good opportunity, especially if it turns out they're not pregnant. We say, this might be a good chance for you to reevaluate the relationship that you're in, because this is a lot of fear that you don't have to have. So let's talk about your boyfriend. Are you guys thinking about getting married? Or, most of the time it's, well, he left, and we talk about the character of men and like what we should be looking for in a potential partner.
If you think you're pregnant and your boyfriend immediately blocks you,
right, and that's another thing is
don't date him.
He blocks me on Facebook. Like, how do I get him back? And I'm like, sis, you don't
want him back.
You don't want him back.
Nobody wants
You're better
him.
than this.
Yeah,
we don't have to live this way. But I've talked with women who felt like, well, I did it, this one time with my boyfriend, and everyone judged me, and I just felt like that's all I could do now.
Right. Yes. So it's this idea, and I think this is even more common in a culture, in the cultures that we're working in on chat, mm-hmm. that you had sex with one guy, so you're ruined.
Right.
And now you have sex with me, because if you had sex with him, why are you saying no to me?
Right.
And that's not okay.
No.
Like, not at all. And we've had young women who've come in with sometimes like higher body counts, and For those of you who maybe are not aware, body count is like the current, I probably shouldn't have used it, but it's the current slang for how many individuals you've slept with.
No, and it's like a legitimate term that people have used in like professional settings.
Oh, okay.
But
Well,
yeah,
I feel
so
better
like I
then.
think it's fine. Like we're not using it in a judgmental way. People literally have body
Okay.
counts.
So they'll say like, "Oh, I've been with this many guys. How do I say no now?" And I'm like, "It's really easy. It's just no.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to," and that's all you need to say.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to. And that's a full sentence.
Yep.
No is a full sentence.
Yeah.
And so just because a woman may have agreed to have sex before with that person or another person or a group of people or whoever, that doesn't mean that they're compelled or obligated to say yes in the future.
Yeah. And I think it's really important, one, just from like a consent level, right? And we talk about consent with clients and we screen to make sure that the sexual activity that's happening is consensual.
Right. They're not being forced or coerced or trafficked or anything like that.
Right. So that conversation is very important, but it's also like a really cool gospel moment to be like, listen, you don't have to live this way, right? You don't have to have this fear of STDs or like constantly like wondering if you're pregnant. But also like you can live a new life and all of this has been taken care of.
Yep. And that doesn't mean that you may not have a disease.
No, that
needs to be managed.
There are consequences for it.
Or even a pregnancy that needs to be handled, dealt with, like continued and fulfilled, whatever. But yeah, Christ forgives.
Yeah.
And that forgiveness is available to all of us, no matter how terrible our sins are. So the other thing that's really interesting about the STD conversation is this idea that some Christians have, although it's thankfully gotten less in the current climate, I guess, is this, and it's mostly older people, like, well, they deserve it. Like, why are you helping people with STDs? Because they deserve it. And it's like, okay, all of us make poor choices that can lead to poor health. Smoking, drinking in excess, eating, not exercising. Yeah. I usually use the eating one if I'm talking to a portly gentleman who's about to be like, wow, why would you treat someone for an STD? And I was like, well,
why would we treat you for diabetes,
all right.
Jimmy?
I'm like, gluttony. I usually, because I'm a jerk, I'll be like, well, gluttony is also a sin. And we treat people for heart disease and diabetes and joint pain and other things that are related to gluttony. Yep. And that usually shuts them down. And I'm not saying that gluttony is the same as sexual sin or that the consequences are the same, because it is easier to lose a few pounds than it is to deal with HIV. Yeah. But all of us have sinned. All of us have made choices that sometimes will continue to have marks on our bodies. And we need to have compassion and also help people with the physical consequences of their sin, whatever that looks like. If it's joint pain from overeating and being too heavy, or diabetes from not controlling your diet, or an STD from sexual intercourse, then we need to help people. Yeah. And we can help people here. And we can share the gospel with them. The other thing that was weird, and this is along with the gospel conversation, is when a woman comes in and she's facing an unplanned pregnancy, there's a lot of anxiety. There is less anxiety most of the time for someone who's concerned about an STD. Right. And some people it's just an errand, no big deal. I'm here to get tested. For other people, they are concerned about it, and they do maybe feel bad or feel upset or whatever, but not typically as anxious or upset as they would be about a pregnancy. And so they're usually more open to discussing things than someone who's coming in for a pregnancy test. Right. Also, it's the only time we see men. Yeah. As clients. Yes. So a man may come in with a woman for a pregnancy test or an ultrasound, but in that case, the woman is our primary client. And so while we may talk with him and like have relationship and have interaction with him, it's not going to be the same. So I'll tell one more story, and then we'll do our Jesus moment. So this is actually one of my favorite. Well, I have two favorites, but I'll tell this one because the other one, there's too many details, and I'm afraid it would be too identifiable. Also, and I think I've shared this before, but every story I share is old. Right. Like, yeah. I'm not sharing if you are sitting here listening to this podcast thinking, I was in the center last week, that sounds like me, it's not. It's not. Like, unless you're hearkening back to a memory that's years old, it's not you. And if you are hearkening back, it's still probably not you. Anyway, gentleman came in, and this matters in a minute, and had concern that he had an STD. Really broken up about it because he had been very faithful to his partner and found that she was not. And I'm using his gender as much as no one will recognize him from this story, because I think that if I had just been gender neutral, we would have assumed it was the opposite.
Yeah.
That the girl was faithful and the guy was not. So I wanted, like, make sure that we know that this guy was faithful. And so he was going through a lot.
Obviously.
Just there was that, but there was some other things going on, family things, work things. Like, the guy was down. Like, he was having a really hard time.
Yeah.
And he shared that he was an atheist, which is not uncommon.
Yeah.
And so Mary Jo actually met with him, and Mary Jo is like a bomb evangelist.
Oh yeah.
She's fantastic. And so she asked him if she could share the gospel, and he said no, which we respect. And then she said, well, is it okay if I pray with you? And he said no. And she said, okay, is it okay if after you leave, if I pray for you? And he said, I guess. Because, like, if you're an atheist, you can't really get mad about it, because
you don't believe in it.
You don't believe in it.
So we're just wasting our time.
Yeah, we're just wasting energy.
Okay.
So he had shared a very specific set of circumstances with her. And she said, I'm going to pray about that.
Okay.
And he said, okay. So he leaves. So he comes back a week later for his follow-up appointment. And he isn't even meeting with Mary Jo. He's meeting with someone else. Okay. I'm sitting in the office. This is why I remember this so clearly. And he sticks his head in and he goes, I need you to tell me about what you're doing. And Mary Jo's like on her computer, like, I don't know, computering. And she goes, what am I doing? Like, what do you? And he's like, my life is changing.
Aww.
The circumstance that he shared with her that seemed so hopeless and so just unsolvable was being resolved.
Wow, that's really cool.
And so he recognized that it was because she was praying for him.
Right.
And he wanted to know more.
All because he came in for an
All because
STD
he became
test.
in for an STD test. And so he left that day with a Bible, like with a plan to like learn more about this Jesus person. Because otherwise there was no other explanation for why his life was changing than that Mary Jo had committed to praying for him.
That's really cool.
I love this ministry.
Yeah, it's great.
It's great. So, Jesus moment.
Well, like I said, like, I think, one, it's important to recognize that, like, forgiveness is real and our sins can and have been forgiven.
And I think it's a 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness.
Yes. And so I think for people who
did you have to think about that?
I for just a second. It's been a really long day.
Pastor Brown, if you're listening to this.
It's been
Pastor Brown.
Going through 1 John, don't.
Oh no! I'm going to email this episode to him and be like, you need to check in with Mikayla.
No. And so, yes, like, he's faithful to forgive. I think it's important to remember that forgiveness when other people talk with us and have conversations about perhaps like their sexual pasts or consequences that they're carrying with that. Have compassion on people.
Yes. It's harder for you than them.
Right. I think it's a good reminder
it's harder for them than you. That was weird.
We're a mess today.
I can't do this.
Oh, like, he's so cute though. Like, right. So it's tough to have that conversation. I think it's important to be compassionate. Especially I think, like, as I think of it as a single person. And like, if I ever got married one day and we have a conversation about something like that, like making sure that compassion is had, especially in the case of, these are past sins that I've turned away from and it's been, whatever. And so just making sure that you're compassionate towards people.
Yep.
I think is
realizing that, like, when you're having these conversations where you are potentially not showing compassion, that people who have made those choices in their past can hear you.
Yeah.
Like, we have people on staff who have sexual exploits, for lack of a better term, in their past. And they've absolutely turned away from that.
Yep.
But they don't need people making them feel guilty about something that happened. I don't even care if it was 6 months ago, but something that they've turned away from, that they've repented for, and that they've walked away from. Like, that's not necessary.
So be mindful about the language that you use, even if you think it's with people that you know. And like, well, we're just joking around and we're friends.
Yeah.
Like,
they would have never. What do you know?
Yeah. It was like, just to be considerate, and you're right. Like, we do have people on staff and we try to be considerate. Like, some things aren't worth joking about.
Just don't be a jerk.
Like, some things aren't actually funny. And
these guys are.
These guys are. But like I tell my little friends, like my small little friends, it's only a joke if both people are laughing.
Right. So
don't be rude, don't be crude,
don't be mean.
Don't be mean.
But also know that if you've caught chlamydia,
we can test and treat it for free.
But you're also more likely to catch gonorrhea.
I thought chlamydia was the more.
No, if you have one STD, you're more likely to.
I see what you mean now. I was like, hold up, chlamydia is the most.
That's how I. That's
recurrent how I STDs.
Yes, I see what so that's how I like share it with people. I'm like, you've caught chlamydia.
This is the first time that I've experienced that particular. Tactic.
Everyone hates it.
So this,
except me.
Weirdly enough, is not the first time that one of these guys has been thrown at me. So
they're gonna join us to remind us. I'm gonna put the African giraffe up here.
Be strong and courageous.
Be strong and courageous. And then we're gonna put chlamydia and gonorrhea right there. They're gonna hang out
and make smart choices,
and know that God forgives.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's not on us to serve justice.
You're not the Holy Spirit.
It's not on us to serve justice in ways. I'm like really irritated by you talking about like, oh well, shouldn't they suffer? Like that just makes me really upset.
It makes me very angry.
Especially thinking about the man who came in. It was not his fault that he was at risk for an STD.
Well, I mean, he wasn't married.
Well, okay. Yeah, I guess that. But like, yeah.
But still.
Still.
Yes, don't be a jerk. Don't be the Holy Spirit. And if you are that sinless, let us know. And we could use a sinless person here.
Sure. Like come work for us if you're sinless.
Yeah. All right. See you next week.